from CREATEINSPAIN. Today I wanted to do a little video on some basic likes in both Shortcut Slot and in Silhouette Studio. Now the reason I've decided to do this video is simply because it's come to my attention that there are people that are using the Brothers Scan and Cut machines, as indeed I have one myself these days, but they are not finding that they have everything they want within Canvas Workspace. But if you're finding that you are not able to do exactly what you want to do with the machine and the software of Canvas Workspace, then the two contenders for this are Shortcut Slot, and I am using version 5, which is the latest version. The alternative is Silhouette Studio, but if you have Silhouette Studio, you must get the business edition because otherwise you can't export to SVG, which means your files are useless for your machine, unless you then put them through another kind of transforming software, which involves yet another step before you put it back into Canvas Workspace in order to export it to your machine via the Wi-Fi, if that's what you're using, or indeed saving it to a USB stick or a thumb drive, whatever you like to call it, to put into the machine and then cut from there. So I've got a crib sheet because I had to think about these things. I've used Silhouette Studio in the past. I haven't used it a lot recently because I tend to be able to do everything that I want to do in Shortcut Slot. But I do understand that Shortcut Slot is fairly pricey for version 5, and maybe Silhouette Studio might be a little lower in budget. So Shortcut Slot 5. One of the benefits of Shortcut Slot is that you can export to a number of formats. When it comes to the Brothers Scan and Cut, the format you want to export to is either SVG or FCM, which is their own format. For me, the tracing in Shortcut Slot is easier and better than I used to find it in Silhouette Studio. Having said that, they may have made improvements to the tracing. I haven't used Silhouette Studio for tracing for many years, but certainly I can trace pretty much most things that I want in Shortcut Slot without any great difficulty. I can obviously add an image layer if I want to do a print and cut, and I can choose blackout if I just want the line outside of my images rather than all the inside detail. And you can vary it. You can do different things like color layers, single color. You can use the alpha channel. You can experiment, but you can get a really good cut line with this software, and it's not very difficult to do. Let's just close that down. The extensive effects menu. Okay, let's put another shape in here. Now the shapes that you get just here are relatively few, but you do have a library of shapes to go for as well. So if I go to my library, we have arrows, basic shapes, some of mine, believe it or not. Just enlarge these. Okay, right, so we got a few shapes here to play with. Now, if I go up to the effects, I get all these different things that I can do. So you've got extrusion and rotating. So let's go for 3D extrude. You can see the effect of that, can't you? You can change it so it's just outline only if you want. But you can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with this. And I can take that and I can go to undo, and I've undone it again. So if I go back to the effects menu, we have some which are more useful than others. Barrel distortion, obviously that means that you're putting something around something which is barrel shaped, and it helps you to do that. Bridge warp is like a stone bridge shape. So you have an arch with a flat top and everything will conform to that. Then you have bulging, pretty obvious. You have canned, you have a drop shadow. Knockout is really handy. That's where you have a lot of background pattern. For example, say you had a background of lots and lots of stars and you wanted to have a circle with a lot of stars cut out of it. Then you'd place your circle over the top and you'd knock it out. So effectively it's like a cookie cutter. Then you have Lattice and you have a line fill. Line fill is useful if you want to do drawing of interior fill lines, or if in fact you want to do some embossing sometimes, that type of thing. It's handy for that, and you can adjust it to however you like. Okay, nesting, I'll go into that a little bit later. Piercing is where you have little holes instead, but that depends on your machine being able to do the piercing. And I think in the case of the Brother Scan and Cut, I think you have to have a particular piercing kit for that. I couldn't swear to it, but I think you have to have a piercing kit. So you have a puzzle generator and you've got QR code, you've got rhinestones. The rhinestone function is okay. It isn't quite as involved as the one on Silhouette Studio. You don't get quite as many options. But you can do rhinestones around the edge of a design. You can do rhinestone fill. Shadow layer, both of them have got that anyway. Then you've got mirroring, tiling. I'm not entirely sure, but tiling might be on the Pro version only. Okay. Title crawl is like you get titles on a movie where it gets wider at one end. And then you've got wave, pretty obvious, it just wriggles like that. You've got weeding, and again, I'm not sure if this is just on the Pro version or whether it's on version 5, so you might want to check if that's what you're interested in. And weeding is very, very useful. Let me just select this one here. Come on, select, there we go. Go to effects and go to weeding. So it will automatically put a cut boundary around your object, and then you can choose what sort of weeding lines that you want and where you want to put them just by clicking. Now with this particular object, it really wouldn't make too much difference, but if I were doing letters, it can make a big difference, particularly if you're doing things which are quite fine, where your letters are going to come up off the backing paper. Being able to add lots of weeding lines is really handy. And this will just cut automatically when you save it as an SVG or an FCM. You'll have your lines cut in there and you just click OK. And it puts that little box with all the weeding lines around. Nice and easy. Regarding the other effect that you might be more interested in, it's the wrapper. And the wrapper is one that, as you can see, goes around a conical shape. So for your mugs and water glasses and all that sort of stuff, a wrapper is quite handy. Right, multiple pages per project. Down here you can see I've got page 1. If I add a new page, it gives me another page. I can name it, I can change the color reference for it. There we go. I can put it in whatever I want to call it, and then it will show up in this bottom line and it's just a new page. This is really, really handy. It's something I use an awful lot, because if I'm taking something which is very involved, perhaps I'm making a 3-dimensional card and it's got print and cut pages, and it's got the base, it's got various things that I want to put on it, then having different pages is quite handy, because most of the time I've only got, for example, A4 card and I need to get everything cut, but I don't want my pages completely and utterly stacked with things on top of each other if I'm then going to export that to Canvas Workspace, because it means I've then got to mess around taking things off. All right, pain in the neck. So to have lots of pages in one project is really handy. I can just take a page, export it to my machine via Canvas Workspace, and what I want to cut on that particular sheet will be there. And everything else is somewhere else, and I just import whatever I need to import. You can have many projects open. You've got a whole area here which you can fill with open projects. Again, that's quite handy, because I might go to my library and go to my projects in here and pick anything out of all the projects that I've got and think, actually, I want to use that stamp in that design, so I'm just going to import that into there and keep it to one side for when I want to use it. Ability to do a stencil bridge. Yeah, this thing here is a stencil bridge, and let me just get a letter in text. If I do a letter B, I'll make this a lot bigger. Okay, right. So the idea of the bridge function is you can change the size of it, so you can change the width of it, and it will automatically put a little cut through and close the path wherever you want to do it. So if you are using a letter which has got holes in it like this, the stencil bridge is what is going to connect this piece here to your outside area so that you can keep it in place, and when you weed it you will be just taking away the outside of the letter for your stenciling. Limitless mat sizes. If I go to this page here, you can see my mat size at the moment is set to that, but I can have whatever I want. I can have it vertical portrait, horizontal landscape, obviously. But if I go to here, I can have custom mat size. And depending on the machine and what your machine capabilities are, I can alter my mat size. You can use shortcuts a lot with many different brands of cutter, but the same will go for Silhouette Studio. If you are saving as an SVG, you won't be able to connect directly from Silhouette Studio and connect to another brand of machine. That it won't allow. With shortcuts a lot, it will. So you have a choice of machines. If I go to Cutter here, you can see that I've got it set up for Platinum Pro. However, if I go up to my cutter and manage cutters, and I go to the company brand, you can see a whole load of brands here that you can use with this particular software. Now, I will say that in Shortcuts a lot, you cannot cut directly to your Brother Scan and Cut. Brother won't let them do that at the moment. Whether that will change in the future, I don't know. I wish it would. I think it would be very sensible. I think Brother would be very sensible to allow that, because it would mean more people would be happy with the cutting prowess of their cutting machines. But, you know, I'm just logical. What else? Oh, the last one I wanted to mention here is that if I select whatever I'm going to cut on the right hand side here, I can set it to cut, to draw, print and cut, cut, print and cut, print. Colour alignment is for when you're doing multi-colour vinyl cuts and things like that. You can have marks put on. But I can set it in that to do things like drawing, which, if it is saved as an FCM file, when I import it into the Canvas workspace software, it will realise that my draw lines are draw lines. If I save this as an SVG and import it, it doesn't attribute a draw line to it. Okay, it's just assuming that it is a cut line, which isn't quite so bad if you've got something which you want to completely draw or completely cut. But if you have a mixture, it means that you've got to try and separate them out, and you've got to then reassign what you want them to be. But if you export it as an FCM, you don't have to. So that's it on the Shortcuts a lot front. Now this, I must stress, is the business edition, because if you want to save as SVG, that's what you have to have. And if you want to cut with any other machine other than the Silhouette machine, you will need to save to SVG. The first thing I will say is that you can have multiple projects open. You just click on the plus button or the cross to close them. So the plus button will add one, the cross will close it off. So you can have different pages open, but they are not It's not a project. You'll save it as an individual project. It doesn't sort of have multiple pages per project, if you see what I mean. But that's nothing particularly bad at all. Now, the good thing is it has some features which Shortcut Slot does not have, and some which work better than Shortcut Slot. And you might be thinking, well, why do I use Shortcut a lot more than I use Studio if Studio is just as good? One of the reasons, or the main reason, is that when I first went from a Silhouette Cameo to a Silver Bullet, in Studio we were not allowed to save as an SVG, and my Silver Bullet needed SVGs. Neither, obviously, could I just plug in my Silhouette Studio and plug it into my Bullet and get it to cut, just using a wire transfer. Okay, I couldn't do that. I can't do that with this with my Brother Scan & Cut either, but I certainly couldn't do it with my Silver Bullet. So that's why I went over to Shortcut Slot in the first place. However, there are some things in Silhouette Studio that Shortcut Slot doesn't have, and features that I quite like. And I don't necessarily use them very often, but they're handy to have around. Now, if you do not have a background in Shortcut Slot and you're wondering which software you want to get, then I suggest you have a look at Studio and see if that might be for you. So the first one on my list here, on my crib sheet, is actually pop-up creation. So with this, I'm going to pick a different shape out of the library. Let's pick up, okay, a Christmas tree. That'll be a reasonable one to do. Ooh, going in different directions. Right, so I have my Christmas tree here. And if I want to make a pop-up card out of this, I go to the right-hand side and there is a little heart in a card, and I click on that and it opens up the pop-up window. And here you got convert selected shape to pop-up. So I do that, and you notice you can see that it's put all these tabs on. And it's also got a little dashed line. I don't know if you can see it too easily, but it's got a dashed line there. Now that dashed line goes inside your card. When it's cut, you put it inside your card, and that dashed line is the center fold. Then all these lines are tabs, and the top line of the tab there and the line here are fold lines, and so that will cut out your Christmas tree as a nice pop-up. I think, have a very old video that I showed you how to actually do that in Silhouette Studio. I do have a Silhouette Studio playlist. It's an old playlist. Most of it probably still stands, but they are relatively old videos. They're about 5 years old. A better puzzle creation. If I just click on this shape here, go to the right-hand side, puzzle pieces, puzzle selected shape, and you can choose the number and the amount of pieces that you have. Let's make that a bit higher. There we go. You can also alter the curve and the ripple of the pieces. And it doesn't show up too well on that one, but yeah, you can alter them. So that is a function that there is in Shortcut a lot, but this has better control over. Rhinestone options. Okay, let's bring in another Christmas tree. Here we go. And go for the rhinestone options. And where are they? Here we go. This circle with the crosshatch through it is rhinestones. So you can have rhinestones around the outside edge. You can have them all the way through. You can also do it in a slightly different pattern. It's a radial fill. So that will adjust it. Not very good for a Christmas tree, but in some cases, if you have like hexagons or maybe letters, sometimes a radial fill can be better. You can release your rhinestones so that you can remove individual ones should you need to. you can change the size of your rhinestones and so on. So you have a rhinestone function built into this, which means if you have a brother scan and cut, you do not need the rhinestone kit at all, okay? You do not need it. When it comes to material to make your rhinestones, you can use card, you can use sticky backed velvet paper, you can use all sorts of things. You do not need the rhinestone kit if you have either Sure Cut Slot or Silhouette Studio. So that will save you quite a considerable amount of money. Replication in here is pretty easy. If I get my select tool, click on this, just close that window down, and I want my replication window, which is this one. So we have replicate, which can give you a certain number and direction of replications. You have rotation of copies here, you have rotate one, you have rotate more than one, you have more again, you have lots. But you can also have a rotation of each copy by so many degrees. And you can also use this particular window to do the object on path. So you have your object, you have your path, and you replicate the object around that path. Handy for doing things like scallops and frames of different sorts. Select by colour. There we go, select by colour. So I've got two colours here and I can select whichever colour I so wish and it will choose the ones in that colour. A very good feature in here is nesting. And nesting is down here, it's the two hands linked. This opens the nesting panel, okay. When it opens up, you get set selected shape as the boundary. So I could select that one. There we go, that is now my boundary. And if I put all these to here, and I do that, and I click on nest, it's going to put them all in here. Now I can increase or decrease the padding, obviously. I can increase the number of rotations allowed, and I can alter it slightly. So this is very, very good for nesting. And the reason I would use it isn't so much to save material, although that can be handy. Sometimes you actually want to cut a shape with other shapes in it and you want them to fill that area. So nesting is handy for that. Now, Sure Cut Slot does have nesting, but it doesn't have nesting that will follow any shape you want. It's simply got a rectangle nesting function. So it is not as flexible. What else have we got? Line effects. Now, I can't say I use these a great deal, but they are around if you want them. Okay, so this is fill effects and edge effects. So you can apply these effects either to the inside or these to the outside. It's recommended for sketching or drawing projects. That is something that Sure Cut Slot does not have a great deal of. You've got the ability to do things like lattice and crosshatch, that sort of stuff. You can do it, but you would have to use line fill. But it doesn't have these, okay? It doesn't have these edge effects. I don't think it has anything like that, but it's not something you couldn't do if you really wanted to. You'd work out a way of doing it, but it just doesn't have it in that easy format. The last one I'm going to mention on here is measurements and angles. You'll see here that I've got measurements up. You can switch them off in the preferences, but you can choose to have them on. Actually, it's not quite the last. There is another thing that I'm going to mention, and it is related to this. So if I was to choose this shape here, it tells me what angle I have drawn and the size of the edges, obviously. But it tells me what I have drawn, and if I adjust it, it tells me what I am drawing. That is something that Sure Cut Slot does not have, and is handy if you're doing lots of things like boxes, where you want to design things with a specific angle. That's a handy thing to have. Now, the other thing that they do have in here, which is really, really good, and I've got it set up so you can see it, is the center of rotation. If I select this and I rotate it at the moment, it's rotating around this point here. Now, if you have a regular shape, that may be fine. If you have an irregular shape, you may want it somewhere else. And all you do is you take it and you drag it. And now, when I do this with the drag handle, it goes around that center point instead. This is something that you cannot do in Shortcuts a lot. You can rotate it around its central axis, but it says where the central axis is. You cannot move it in the same way. You can adjust it in Shortcuts a lot so that it rotates around something else, but it isn't something you can actually physically see with a really obvious marker like that. It is different. You can adjust it numerically, but it doesn't show you. Until you've actually done your rotation, you won't know what the actual effect is. And then if it's not right, you have to go back to the beginning and start again. So that is the plus side of Silhouette Studio. Now, it may be that over time I go back to using Studio a bit more. It may be that I don't. But it is certainly capable of doing pretty much anything that you're going to want to do if you're using Brother Scan and Cut, or for that matter, another machine. The one thing that it cannot do is communicate directly with other machines other than Silhouette. So that's it. That's my take on the two forms. I don't know what the pricing is of Studio at the moment, but bear in mind you need to look at the price for the business edition. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Take care now.